Okay guys, so in this video I'm going to show you how to use Git to keep track of the work you have already done or you're about to do, and also how to download and collaborate in a Git project that others have started already. So even though these three examples are very similar to each other, we're going to cover all three of them anyway, just so that you see that there are only little changes. So what is the situation for our first example? Let's assume that I have already done some work on a little project. Right now I'm on the RV supercomputer Ollie, and I'm in a folder called example1, and I have three little files. So let's assume that these are really interesting and important files and not empty ones that I just created. And I want to add these three files to a database to keep track on every work that I do on them, and also to be sure that I never lose them again. How do I do this? First of all, let us check if Git is installed. I can do this by just typing Git, or if I also want to know which Git version is used, I type git ---- version, and I see that it's a fairly old version of Git that is by default installed on Ollie. So that is not a problem, because on basically every supercomputer I know, you can just type modulo git and you get a fairly recent version. So 2.13 is new enough for everything that we're going to do. Great. So what next? Next, I want to show you that this little project is not part of a repository already. So I can do this by typing git status. That is basically the line we're going to use most in this workshop. And it says it's not part of a Git repository. This is what we're going to do now. So how do I set up a new repository? I just type git init, and it tells me we have a new and empty Git repository now in a hidden folder in the same directory. So let's show you. If I also show the hidden ones, there is a folder .git. That is basically the empty database we're going to use for this project. But it's still empty. We have not done anything. So again, if I type git status, that looks quite different now. It says that we are on branch master, which is the default branch of every Git project. It tells us that there are three files. Our three files, and they are untracked. That means they are not part of the database. Whatever we do is not getting tracked. So we want to change this. How we do it? So the good thing about git status is that it also tells us usually what we are about to do. Git add, and we could now type the file name. It's much easier to just type git add and a dot. That adds everything in this folder and recursively in all subfolders. Again, git status. Now you also see the color has changed. It tells us there are new files and they are staged. That means they are to be committed in the next commit. So commit is always a change in the database. Let's make it commit now. So we type git commit. And with every commit, you need to give a commit message. You need to say what you're actually doing and what were the last changes. So we could just type -m and then write something useful. So in this case, we just type first commit. You can do something much more fancy here. Okay, so chances are you're going to see something like this now. So the thing is that I removed my configuration before I started recording, and that means that Git does not know my name and my email address. Why does it need to? Because everything you do with Git, every commit is signed. You cannot do something anonymously. So if you're just working on something on your own, that seems a bit much. But believe me, if you're working with a group of people on the same lines, then you want to know who to blame for something. So let's do exactly what it suggests here. Git config global username, and we can set our name. There we go. And the same for the email address. Now, just for the sake of it, I'm doing a typo here. Okay, like this. Okay, so now I see, oh no, there was a typo. So how can I change this later? So everything that you define with git config, and there's a lot you can define with git config, goes into a configuration file that is hiding in your home directory. So it is called git config. Wait, config. And there you see the entries that we just made. And I can just edit this one here and correct it. There we go. I could have used a similar line to like this to correct this as well. So there's going to be a lot to configure if you want to, but these two lines, they need to be in the git config. Okay, so what happened? Let's check. Is this committed or not? You see, it's not committed yet. We can try again now that we have a username and a user email address defined. And there we go. We have our first commit. We have 3 files changed. We have 3 modes created. That means there's these 3 files are new entries to our database. And now everything we do and commit is tracked with these 3 files. Great. That was only half the work though, because up to now we are working with a local database which is lying in this hidden folder here. So no synchronization with any Git server yet. If we remove the whole folder example1, then the whole database is gone and the whole project is lost. If we remove this Git folder, then we are not part of any Git project anymore. This is not what we want. We want to be able to synchronize this with a server like GitLab and be able to, first of all, back up the stuff that we do here. If something goes horribly wrong, we can get it back from the server. Also, we can exchange this with other coworkers, and we can access this from other machines like Mistral. So what do we need? We need a project called example1 on a Git server. Let's do this. So for this, we're going to the gitlab.dkrz server. So the address is gitlab.dkrz.de. It's HTTPS, that's important. And you get to this page that asks for your username. So in the email that contained the agenda, I also asked you to make sure that you can log in here. So let's go. You put your DKRZ username here, password, and you get to your first page. So here's a list of all the projects you're in. That's probably for you, it's quite a short list. What we want is new project up here in the upper right corner. So you give the project name, and we call this example1. And you see here the default address of the project. It's https gitlab.dkrz.de. Then your DKRZ login name, and then the project name. If you're in any group, like ESM tools, you can also use the group name here. But for the time being, this is fine. You can also choose if this is visible to only people that you invite, which is, I think, is the best choice for the time being, or if this should be visible to everyone. So if you know what you're doing, you can use these also. So let's just create the project. Doesn't take long. There it is already. And it says the repository for this project is empty. Okay, let's change this. Going back to Ollie. What we want to do is we want to push the changes that we did here to the server. First of all, we need to say git which server is going to be linked to this Git repository on Ollie. So let's do that. We can say git remote. The remote is always the remote server. We add a new one. This new one needs a name, and the default name, if you only have one, is origin. And then we give the address. You can use a Git port or an HTTPS port. I prefer the HTTPS port, gitlab.dkrz.de. And then the address that you have just seen, which is your login name, and then the name of the project. It was not project, it was example1. That could work. It most surely works if you put .git. Okay, so now we know where to synchronize our stuff, and let's try it. Usually we would just type git push, but every time you have a new branch in your project, and now we have a new branch, namely the master branch, you need to say with which server to synchronize this branch. So we say -u, which is upstream, means server we're going to use for synchronization. The name is origin, we just defined that. And we say which branch, it's the master branch. Okay, so it needs a username and the password. It's the same password that you used for login. And there we go. So now it tells us branch master set up to track remote branch master from origin. Good. And we have written 3 objects in total. Yeah, our 3 files. Let's check. Let's go to the project side. And now we see there's our 3 files now arrived at the server.